Well,
hi, nice to see you and hear you. So a few minutes, we are ready to start.
Okay, fantastic, no problem. You can hear me okay?
Yeah. In Kiev, everything is good. Seems to be. So I think we are ready to start now, yeah? Do we have already our stream? Yeah. So, okay. Greetings from Ukrainian Startup Fund. We are ready to start our workshop with the Managing Director of the International PR Office, Marc Cohen, who specializes in PR in tech industry. And our main goal for today is to understand how to ensure your startup stands out from the crowd. And workshop topics for today are the following. First, what is PR and why it is important for your startup? Then, how to launch effective communication tools and communication strategy with a focus on attracting investment, customers, partners, and new talents. Then we will have a Q&A session. So prepare your questions to discuss them all with us today. So let's start. Dear Marc, the stage is yours. So welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting me today, Lena, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join. Yeah, very excited to be able to make this presentation to you all and hopefully share a little bit of knowledge and experience of how you can use communications and PR to really turbocharge your startups and work towards a really positive outcome for your businesses. I'm going to share some slides. Hopefully they're not going to sort of dominate too much from what I'm saying. I generally don't use a lot of slides, but I think in a situation like this, it's helpful to have some things on the screen in front of you. I should take maybe only 15, 20 minutes or so to present, maybe a little bit longer, and hopefully there'll be enough time for questions afterwards. So I'm now going to share my screen, and let me know if there's an issue with seeing the presentation.
Yes, we can see.
So you can see that. So you can see the first slide. Excellent. Okay. Well, yeah. As we said, this is about the ensuring that you stand out from the crowd and that you're differentiated. I don't think there's ever been a time in history where there have been so many new companies every day. Thousands of companies all over the world are registered and launched with lots of amazing ideas. At the same time, the media industry has never been smaller in terms of the number of publications, journalists writing about companies. So there's a huge kind of scramble, a battle, if you like, for attention, where more and more companies are trying to reach an audience that is shrinking. The good news is that communications is evolving, and it's not just about having a journalist or a third party tell your stories for you. There's more and more things you can do to directly communicate with your key stakeholders. But it's a very interesting dynamic at the minute, and nonetheless, the attention of your stakeholders, whether it's through the media or direct to investors and other key people, people are busier than ever, and therefore the ability to make your business stand out is perhaps never been more important. And hopefully this presentation will give you some tools and some insights as to how you can do that. So, as you just heard, a very brief agenda. I'll give a little introduction to my company. I don't want to spend too long on that, but I think it's helpful for you to see some context. What is PR and why do you need it? How you can tell your story. Crucially, who you're trying to speak to. There's no point telling a great story if you're talking to the wrong audience. Some practical tools that you can use to develop your communications, and how you can make sure you've got the right strategy to succeed. And then lastly, how you can keep track of your progress so that the ROI, the return on investment, is appropriate. And then we'll have some time for some questions at the end. Let me know if at any point, Evelina, if you can't hear anything I'm saying, or if I need to slow down or anything like that. So I'll let me know. Otherwise, I will proceed.
Yeah, sure. Everything is okay. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. It's always a bit funny when you do these presentations via webinar or via Zoom. I'm still a bit old-fashioned and used to seeing people in person, so I'm still getting used to talking to a computer screen, even 2 years after COVID. And I do hope before long I'll be able to actually, please God, come to Kiev in person and see you all and actually do something like this face to face, because that's always better, I think. So very briefly, a bit about our firm, just so you understand perhaps why I was asked to give this short talk today. We work across corporate communications, so helping companies with their anything that a company says publicly, we call corporate communications. Slightly more specifically, we have financial and political. Financial is talking to investor audiences, and political, obviously, talking to governments and regulators and things like that. Business has been going for, as you say, quite some time. How long now? Nearly 20 years, 18 years. We have 20 staff. Our head office is in London, but we have offices and affiliates all around the key markets, particularly in the US, and we have some people in Europe and the Middle East. And we did until recently actually have a colleague in Kiev as well. Unfortunately, she's now in Zurich, but nonetheless helps us a lot with local PR. And also very pleased to have with me today, who's listening in, Alexandra Shevchenko, who's actually from Kiev, who recently was able to get a visa and move to London, and has recently been hired by us to work as a communications professional as well. So we're very excited to have Alex in the business as well, working across international clients, but also she'll be great working on some of our Ukrainian business too. And then the people we act for, who we advise, as you would imagine, lots of startups and maybe slightly larger growth companies, but we also go all the way through to listed companies as well as VCs, and then we have other parts of the business as well who work with other clients. We don't just focus on tech, but probably about half the business is technology, all different types of tech. We don't specialize. Probably more like 60% of our clients are UK, 40% international. I mean, got a great track record of, I've been working in and out of Ukraine for 15 years or so. I worked on the first 3 IPOs on the London stock market of Ukrainian companies 10, 12 years ago. And since then, we've done lots of great work in Ukraine, both in the startup, but also working with some larger companies too. Won't talk too much about this, but basically we believe that research is very important to understanding our clients specifically, so that we give the best tailored advice to each client. And it's not about just the outcomes, about the inputs, about how much work we do, but it's all about the value that you add. You have to always ask yourself, what's the return on investment? And is my business moving forward, or is it not moving forward? And understanding that every client is different. No one has the same objectives. And therefore, when you're working on a communications protocol, whether it's for an agency or whether you're thinking about it in-house, if you're only just starting your business, you really need to make sure you have the right strategy in place for your specific needs. I won't go through this in detail, but we do every type of service connected to PR, from media relations, investor relations, crisis, copywriting, support with websites, etc., etc. It's all on our website if you really want to look. Some experience, you'll see Parimatch Tech is a large Ukrainian company. That's one of our clients. We also work with other larger tech companies like Playtika, that has a larger, very gaming. They do social and casino games, and they have a big operation also in Kiev, all the way through to some smaller startups that you necessarily wouldn't have heard of. But it gives you a kind of a good mix of the type of work that we've done, both some famous companies and some newer companies as well. Okay, so getting on to the more interesting things. What is PR and why do you need it? Well, maybe we can start with an official definition, which I think is quite helpful, from the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, which is the trade body that regulates PR in the UK. Public relations is the discipline that looks after reputation with the aim of earning understanding and support or influencing opinion and behaviour. It's the planned, and that's very important, planned and sustained effort. Doesn't just happen overnight, so you really need to work on it. It's a planned and sustained effort to establish and maintain goodwill and mutual understanding between an organisation and its stakeholders. I think that's quite a long, very British sentence, but really it's all about making sure your reputation is key. There's goodwill in your business, people understand what you do, and you can really influence those stakeholders that you're trying to reach. That's what PR is all about. It's not about how many column inches you can have in a newspaper or how many blogs you can post or how many tweets you can do. It's can you move your business from a position of low understanding to a position of high understanding and knowledge amongst the really important people that are going to help you be really successful. So the first part of that is telling your story, because you can have the best contacts in the world and do the most interesting things, but if you don't have a really good, strong story, if people don't understand why they should care about your business, then they're not going to succeed. So what problem are you trying to solve with your startup? Why is no one else able to do what you're doing? Why should anyone care? In a world where there are so many different companies starting, so many amazing ideas, everything looks wonderful. Why should an investor, why should someone you're trying to recruit, maybe it's an engineer, why should a journalist or anyone really care about your business? What makes you special? Will you be commercially successful? You may have a great idea, but if it isn't commercial, then obviously it's not really going to work. Are you having impact? So can you show that you're doing good as well as doing well? In this day and age, people want to be inspired and motivated by companies. And most importantly, why should anyone give you their money or give you their time? And these are the key questions at the outset of any PR or communications program you need to really, really think about and have very, very good answers for. Something to consider is that when you're starting a new business or when you're communicating for the first time, or even when you've been maybe communicating for a while, but you're trying to kind of break into a new market, you have to be better than what's out there. It's not good enough just to be equal. You have to show, well, what you're doing is better than the alternative. So it's quite a high bar. So then who do you need to influence? And broadly speaking, there are three categories, maybe sometimes more, but investors, because if you don't have the money, then the business isn't going to last very long. Customers and partners, well, if you're not generating revenue, then investors aren't going to invest. And then thirdly, talent. That could be existing people or it could be new people, but you need a real sort of symbiotic relationship between these three. And each of these three audiences needs to really know and understand what makes your business different. And then you need to have a plan in place to reach each of them. So how do you go about doing that? What are the tools that you need to be effective? You've got your story, you've figured out who the key audiences are. Well, I mentioned at the beginning about planning. Sometimes people think a great PR communication happens overnight. If I had $1 for every time someone said, oh, how much does it cost me to be in the Wall Street Journal? Or how much to get into TechCrunch? That's the wrong question. You don't look at these things as a small series of mini transactions. You look at it as a strategic body of work where you start at A and you get to Z and then you plan out every step of the way. One of those steps might be an article in TechCrunch, but you have to ask, why do you want to be in TechCrunch? What's the benefit of being in TechCrunch? How can I get there? Maybe it's more important to be in the Kyiv Post, or maybe it's more important to be in, I don't know, Gambling Today, whatever your sector might be. You really need to think it through. So to do that, you need to plan. You need to have a messaging document summarizing these are the 4 or 5 things that make my business really unique and special. You need to have some good questions to the answers to the potentially difficult questions that people might ask you. You need to have that summarized in a one-pager so that someone can, you can send it to someone quickly if they need it. Good photography, good videography, good websites, social media channels, case studies, all of these things you need so that you can encourage journalists to cover your business, and also other stakeholders like investors and even employees to really see what you're trying to do. Then you need to have some news flow, because if you're not regularly putting news out into the market, or at least have some things to say, then how are you going to be able to keep on raising awareness? So often companies feel that they should just have coverage purely because of the fact that they are a really good company. Well, journalists don't really care if you're a good company or not. What they want is news flow. You need to help them fill their space on their websites or in their newspapers or on their radio or on their TV or wherever it might be with interesting things. So what is your business doing that's interesting? What are the good corporate developments that you're doing? Can you prepare good press releases to announce the interesting things that you're doing? Do you have the right media contacts to share that news with? And can you actually tell the story in an interesting and compelling way? So you have your planning, you understand what your news flow is, but how do you then get that out there? So bottom left, we talk about having a good knowledge of sector journalists, local journalists, international journalists. You need to be really organized, have a good database, the right email addresses and phone numbers, and those all need to be kept up to date. And then, like I was saying, you need a regular program of engagement so that you're constantly going to the market in a sustained way, not just big one-offs and then you go quiet. On top of that, to really set yourself apart, do you have a strong view on some of the major trends that are happening in the industry? Do you have stats, statistics? Can you present some data which backs up what you're trying to say? Do you have an expert view on the market? All these things contribute to having a really successful communications toolkit. So you've got the tools, you've got the story. Well, what's your strategy? And this is where you really need to think about what you want to say, when you want to say it, and how you want to say it. And this involves being sometimes quite disciplined and really thinking about what are the 4 or 5 key things I want to be in the market? When is the right time? If you talk about them too soon, maybe when you don't have the case studies or you don't have the right story in place, then people may not be so interested. If you wait too late, then you've missed an opportunity. And how do you say it? What's the medium you say it through? Do you talk about it on social media? Do you try a press release? Do you write a blog or an article, or do you give a TV interview? This is all part of the strategy that you need to think about when communicating. And then crucially, how can you keep track of what you're doing? How can you measure success? And there are different ways of doing this. And it's probably the question that we get asked the most by entrepreneurs is, how can you keep track of the progress? I think one slightly cheat response that we use sometimes, but it is true, is it's not so much about can you afford to do this, is can you afford not to? Because in a world where everyone is communicating, everyone is fighting for attention, putting their point of view across, if you stay quiet or if you don't do it in a clever, strategic and sustained way, then you will fall behind. There is no doubt. Now, putting a value to that, it might be difficult, but you have to ask yourself the question, if the right people know about my business and they know about us for the right reasons, will that move us forward? And if the answer is yes, then you have no choice but to invest in this type of work, whether it's investing your own time if you have the expertise, or whether you have it in-house, or whether you work through an agency, or however you build up. The question is, can you afford not to do this? Within that, you can look at things like how much press coverage do we receive? How many articles have we written on our website? How many blogs have we produced? How much social media have we done? And what is the reach of that social media? And you can also do things like potentially survey your customers and survey your stakeholders, ask them what they think of you, have they heard of you? There are different ways you can measure the return on investment. But fundamentally, you have to ask yourself, is this something that you can afford to ignore in the modern age? I thought it might be useful just to run through some case studies without going into great detail. I mean, Playmaker is actually an Israeli company. It's a sports technology business. And they wanted to be in the tech media like VentureBeat, and also in some of the sports media like Sky Sports, talking about how their boot-mounted sensor was really helping improve player tracking performance. So this is some of the outcomes, some of the media that arises, but to get there, they had to go through the process that I've talked through before. And as you can see, the results were very positive. Elios is a health tech company. They're in the sector of behavioral health, and they have an AI-based technology helping behavioral therapists get better results from their patients. And they wanted to start with a fundraise, PR around the fundraise, and use that to get themselves coverage. And particularly for them, what was really important was the healthcare trade media. So Moby Health and HIT were key publications for them. And again, this was just the beginning of the campaign to maintain their profile. It didn't start and finish with a fundraise. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to be doing a Series A, or I'm going to be doing a fundraise, and I want to get some PR for that fundraise. But if they're not thinking about what you do after that, then you can really leave a lot of value behind, because you can get some really nice coverage on a fundraise, let's say. But if you then don't back that up with a sustained ongoing program of activity, then very soon the fundraise is forgotten and there's a huge vacuum. And then next time you come to say something, maybe a year later, you have to start all over again. Similar type of thing. This is a drone technology company, again, for them being in the trade and the defense media. You see the defense post there, or the drone media was really important. Actually, we've done 2 lots of drone. The other one was a defense, more of a military drone. This one is a commercial scanning oil and gas pipelines in Canada, particularly. And yeah, this is another example of e-concrete might sound like a contradiction in terms, but they have developed a way of using kind of technology to improve the marine construction industry, and particularly how concrete is deployed. It's very technical, but as you say, sometimes these things can be more easy to understand, like a football sensor which tracks player performance, and other times it could be a little bit more esoteric. But nonetheless, there is a market for everything, and it's about making sure that the news gets into the right market and you're targeting the right types of publications. So hopefully I've given you a very, appreciate quite quick, maybe a slightly short overview of what's involved with PR, how you can go about building a communications program, how you can have the right messaging and the right strategy, track your performance, and some indication of what the results might look like. And I think at this point, I might stop speaking and see if anybody, I don't know, anybody has any questions. How does it work, Evelina? Do people just speak, or do they tell you?
Well, Marc, thanks a lot for your very interesting presentation. Actually, we have some participants here with us, so maybe do you have any questions? So you can raise your hand and just ask. But as we can see during the YouTube stream, there were no questions. As for now, maybe then they will ask individually. We will see. Yeah, but nevertheless, we will save this workshop in our social media and in our YouTube official channel, so then everyone can see it in the saved version. Yeah, and maybe also for those who will be interested, we will share individually your slides just to remind some key points. So I think that, yeah,
with pleasure. It's always funny. I mean, it's always tricky to ask questions in these types of formats. I know that often people are either a bit shy or just digesting the information. So if anyone has any questions, they can maybe through you follow up, or my contact details are on the slides as well. That's absolutely no problem. And yeah, with pleasure, you can share this with anyone, and there's more information on our website as well. So that was quite a lot to cover in a short space of time. So I hope that was at least a kind of a flavour, an introduction to the types of questions you need to be asking yourself and making people aware of what's involved when they are ready to start communicating their business into the outside world.
Yeah, sure. So I think that's all as for now. And thanks a lot again for your very interesting and intensive presentation, masterclass for Ukrainian startups. So I hope that everyone was very delighted. And if there will be any questions or proposals to make intro or to connect you with the Ukrainian teams, so you can always contact me, any who is interested, or talk directly to Marc. So here you can see his email and phone number. So yeah, thanks PR Office Company and its director Marc Cohen for today's webinar. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So have a good end of the day and the working week. So it was a pleasure to have you here in Ukraine, even online. So thanks a lot for your time, Marc. Thank you.
My great pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah. So stay in touch and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.